Hey folks, well, a while back I had a gentleman contact me asking me if I would review one of his knives. And I said sure. I love reviewing knives because it gives me a chance to handle knives that I would not otherwise be able to handle, and lets me figure out certain aspects of certain knives that maybe I want to draw from, and on the continuing quest to find the perfect knife. So anyway, the gentleman's name is Christopher Apodaca, I think is how you say his name. I'm terrible with names, but anyway, Christopher. Christopher sent me this knife, and I said, before he even said it, I said, I don't do bad reviews. I don't really find it necessary to be super negative. So if I do not like the knife, or if it underperforms, I'll just send it back to you, and I won't say anything. And he said he welcomes any constructive criticism that I might be able to throw out there. So I'm going to go ahead and review this knife and post it, even if it's not, one of my normal, really like this knife type reviews. One thing I will say is I have done a little bit of work with it. I carved up some fat wood. I made a fat wood fuzz stick, fat wood feathers, made a fire from it. Right off the bat, normally a handle like this is just a little bit too small for me, but the way he has shaped it, it works, and it works for me, even though I like bigger handles. Sometimes when folks, it's hard to describe because everybody's hand's going to be different, but then for me the knife handle has to be semi-symmetrical. And what I mean by that is it has to have the proper thickness in relation, well, I guess this might be the girth in relation to the thickness of the handle. In other words, it can be a really big handle, but if it's long and skinny, it's going to make up here, it's going to hurt against your hand. Or if it's really fat and doesn't have, proportion to it, it's got to be a proportional handle. This handle works for me. I do like this handle, actually. It's a nice carving style knife. It seems to be pretty light, even though it's got about a 5-inch blade. I'll run through the specs here real quick. It's the overall length is 10 1/8 inches long. This is made out of zebra wood, the handle, the scales. The steel is 1095. He says it's approximately a 59 Rockwell. And let's see, I got some stuff on the back here. A 5-inch blade, 1/8 of an inch steel, and the sheath is 7-ounce leather. And it's a nice wet form sheath. It's got the artificial sinew stitching. It's a good sheath. I like it. I think he said his wife makes them. So this knife, he said, would retail for approximately $175 with maple scales, not the zebra wood. Alright, so having said all that stuff, let's get a close-up of it. I'm not going to pretend that I know all the awesome names for all the different grinds. I mean, I know most of them. I would think this would be a Scandivex, but I'm not 100% sure. It starts off as like a Scandi and then has another grind in that as well, like not a micro bevel, but just a secondary grind to it. So that's why I would consider that a Scandivex, because that's what I've researched. That's what I think it is. Alright, so whenever I get a knife from a new manufacturer or a manufacturer that I've never tested before, I always like to do an oak baton test. Not that I would ever do that with my knives once I've tested them, but it's a good test to see if the edge is going to break or chip or roll. So, alright, let's get started. Alright, well, I got a split piece of oak. You can tell there's a knot there. There's a knot in there. It's split, but this knife should definitely be able to take pieces off of this piece of oak. I went through a couple knots already. I'm just going to test the edge, or look at the edge. It actually splits this really nice. It's a pretty good splitter. That went right through there. You can tell the knot structure here. Right through that knot. Looks perfect to me. A fuzz stick real quick. So I've been feathering oak with this, and it still has maintained its edge. I went ahead and feathered a little softer wood to see if it would feather correctly with the correct type of wood, and it did. It worked good. I got a nice little ball here. I'm going to throw some shavings underneath that, I think. Alright folks, well, that was my first bow drill fire in about 6 months. It took me a little bit of messing around. I already had the one flat part, the hearth board made. I just batoned another little section off of that, made a spindle, and whipped up a bow drill. Alright, final thoughts on this knife. For the size of this knife, it's actually pretty lightweight, which is a good thing, in my opinion, especially for a bushcraft knife. You want to be able to have some finesse with it. You don't need this big huge chunk of steel on your hip for just bushcrafting. The handle, even though I've said a million times that I like fatter handles, this is a semi-skinnier handle, but with the swell in the belly here, and just like I was talking about before, the proportion between the depth and the width is correct on this handle for me. I did not get any hot spots really, maybe just a tiny little bit up here, but that's just because, like I said, I like bigger handles, and I worked it pretty hard. I've done, what have I done with this knife? I've done a fat wood fire, making a fuzz stick from fat wood, feathering, and then using my ferro rod on the back of the spine. I've done an oak one-stick fire. I just did a bow drill fire. I cut down a sapling and made like an improvised frog gig, fish spear type thing. So I mean, I've definitely used it. I think I stripped the bark off of a piece of basswood. Now most of those are softwood projects. Obviously the one-stick oak fire is not. But I gotta say, this knife has retained its edge quite well. It's still, I think I can still shave with it. Yeah, it's just, yeah, there's freaking hair just flying everywhere. So as far as the steel goes, I like it. It's a 1095. Sometimes folks will heat treat these high carbon steels to a soft, what I consider a softer type temper, like around 56, 57 on the Rockwell scale. Christopher says this one is approximately 59. I know that when I get my knives from now on, I like either 59 or 60. That makes it hard enough to where I don't worry about the edge retention is a lot better. And then for me, the extra hardness isn't a big deal as far as when it goes to sharpening. Overall, I think it's a real good knife. The sheath is nice. I forget where I put it. Oh, it's right here. The sheath is nice. It's a lightweight sheath. Just the whole package is actually quite lightweight. So for those of you who like lighter, like I said, more finesse type knives, this would be pretty cool. Got a cool design up here on the blade up here, an etched design. Overall, I like it. I like it a lot. Now, having said that, I'm going to be picky with this knife. I talked to Christopher, and he said he's welcome to constructive criticism. And I've been called, a knife guy. That's what that term means sometimes, is that you really look at a knife's lines. So this is a functional, very, very functional, very good blade and handle designed knife. What sometimes folks will look at, if you're a knife guy or whatever, are the lines on the knife, like I said. I'm going to get a close-up of this, and we're going to go through this knife with a fine-tooth comb, because for $175, knife makers have to set themselves apart from other folks, because there's a lot of folks out there making knives. Some of them are better quality than others, but once you get the quality down, you have to look at the lines. Let's get a close-up of this and take a look at it. First thing I'm going to look at it is I'm going to look at the grind marks on the spine. I don't see any grind marks on here. I don't know how well it's going to show up on camera, but you're going to see the transition from where he started sharpening the back of the spine. So you're going to see a little brush mark there. That's very common. But as far as like nicks or grind marks from a sander or a grinder that has not been ground out, I do not see any of that. Look, that's got a nice mirror polish on that blade. It corresponds well with that etching. Okay, so I'm going to say the blade itself has really good lines. I wish that it had a better point. Okay, that point should be a little sharper. And the end of that handle isn't 100% perfect. Now, like I said, I'm nitpicking this, but this is what folks are going to look for. It's what I look for. And then right there, right where the handle meets the blade, is not 100% square on both sides. It's uneven. Okay? Like I said, I don't know how well that's going to show up on camera, but I can see it with my eye. I can feel a ridge right here where the scales do not meet the metal. And I can actually take my fingernail and it's smooth till I get to the metal. Maybe just a tiny bit, but I wouldn't pick on that. This here is actually a little bit noticeable. Alright folks, well I hope you liked this review of this knife. It performed really well. It was The steel was really good. I really was impressed with it. Nice 90-degree spine, just, you know, comfortable, everything. With a little bit of, a little more eye for detail, I think this would rank right up there with some of the good knives. Now I will say, in Christopher's defense, he said he made this knife for himself. So when you make something for yourself, sometimes you don't make it to the same specs maybe that you make it for someone else. But having said that, I notice these things, and I'm going to bring it up in a review just so that everyone knows this is the knife that I reviewed. So, you know, if you talk to Christopher's customer base, and you know the knives that he makes, that he ships out the door, are most likely of a higher quality, maybe aesthetically, than the one that he made for himself. Anyway, it's pretty minor stuff, but that's what I look for. Alright guys, take care.